Hey, music junkies. Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. We invite you to join our community of music celebration. You can subscribe below. Make sure to hit the bell so you don't miss out on our daily content. You can also become a patron to help us curate the great history of the rock era, interviews with artists about the greatest songs. Childhood friends George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley created one of the most iconic bands of the 1980s. Of course, named the group Wham, a word that they felt represented the energy, the ambition, and really the spirit of their friendship. Now, Wham was only a unit for 3 studio albums over 4 short years, but at their zenith in 84 and 85, they were one of the world's most popular British-based acts, really in the same echelon as Duran, and Culture Club. They sold more than 30 million albums. As George Michael would later sing in Freedom 90, kind of reminiscing, they had every big shot, good time band on the run, boy. Yeah, did they ever.
We had every big shot, good time band on the run, boy. We were living in a fantasy.
Michael and Andrew actually met when they were 12 years old at Bushymead School near the borough of Watford, England. Andrew befriended George, who was the new kid at school. Now, their first semblance of a band was actually a ska-flavored project they called The Executive in '79. The Executive consisted of Andrew and George, along with Andrew's brother Paul. It was David Austin and Andrew Lever. After months of rehearsals, they had their first big gig inside a Methodist church in Bushy. Now, the boys wrote a theme song for The Executive titled Rude Boy, which they recorded onto a 16-track demo tape with aspirations of getting a record deal, and they aggressively shopped that demo to no avail. Alas, The Executive soon crumbled, and that opened the door for George and Andrew to officially form Wham. They did that in 1981. Their pursuit to become pop stars became relentless, and they pestered about every A&R person in England to give them that shot. That tenacity paid off when Mark Dean signed the duo to a small independent record label. It was called Intervision, basically capitulating to their persistence, especially Andrew's constant badgering. Dean finally agreed to a token recording deal for Wham, figuring that he'd give him a try, see what they could do with very little financial risk to him and his label. So Wham dropped a couple of 12-inch singles, including Wham Rap in early '82. Then came the release of the single Young Guns in late 1982, a song that George Michael wrote about 2 partners in crime in jeopardy of having the dynamics of their friendship disrupted by a serious girlfriend who wants her man to be monogamous and stay away from his troublemaking playmate. Young Guns also features George Michael, the rapper, a vocal style that he summarily discontinued after the recording of Wham's debut album. It's probably a smart idea. Love George Michael, not as a rapper. Young Guns was really quietly going nowhere until all of a sudden Wham got a huge break when they were invited to perform on UK's heavily watched TV show Top of the Pops. They replaced one of the acts that were scheduled to play, but they had to drop out, and George and Andrew killed it. The response to Wham's performance on Top of the Pops was frenetic, especially with teenage girls. Young Guns was languishing outside of the top 40 on the UK chart, but after their appearance on Top of the Pops, it zoomed all the way up to number 3. It was really the tipping point that George and Andrew were hoping for. Screaming Wham mania had begun in full force. They released their debut album Fantastic in 1983, and the LP yielded 4 top 10 hits in the UK, including a re-release of Wham Rap, which didn't chart on its initial run, but it rose to number 8 on the rebound, along with Young Guns, Bad Boys, and Club Tropicana. Great song. After a legal battle, which was not a pleasant experience, Wham were able to extricate themselves from Intervision and sign an international deal with Epic Records and a US deal with Epic's sister label, Columbia Records. The respective deals gave Wham really that major label promotion and distribution that would rocket them to global superstardom. Their second album, Make It Big, that was released in '84. It hit the top of the album chart in virtually every country around the world. However, the record's success marked an inevitable development in the band's evolution when George Michael became the sole producer, and really the writing was on the wall for George to break away for a solo career. The breakup of Wham was officially announced in the spring of '86, and later that summer, Music from the Edge of Heaven, the third and final LP by Wham, was released. It was called that in the US, Pretty much everywhere else it was called The Final, but it proved to be anticlimactic given the dissolution of the group. Now, after the formal announcement of the breakup, Wham played a sold-out concert at Wembley Stadium in London in front of 72,000 fans. It was an emotional farewell, to say the very least. Considering the youthful subjects of their songs and George's desire to create more sophisticated music and have the freedom to do further collaborations with artists outside of the scope of Wham, it really is understandable why Andrew and George had to end their union as Wham. Now, Andrew Ridgeley acknowledged that Wham was not intended to mature in theme or style. In his words, and I quote, "Wham would never be middle-aged," end of quote. He was also honest about believing that George Michael was the superior songwriter. George Michael's pretty much the superior songwriter to almost anybody, and it was time for George to move on to realize his full career potential. George and Andrew remained close friends right up to George's timely passing in 2016. After the breakup of Wham, Andrew moved to Monaco and did some motor racing, and then he moved to LA to pursue acting and singing opportunities. The LA experience proved futile for Andrew, though, so he moved back to England in '90. That same year, Andrew began a long relationship with Karen Woodward from Bananarama. They separated in 2017, but happily reunited in 2019. Andrew stays busy, writing, cycling, and doing charity work. He has a great book that we'll have a link for at the end of this. He's a really passionate guy. As for the incomparable George Michael, we will do many features on him in the near future, including the story of his huge pop culture impact as a solo artist and celebrity, and his incredible artistry on the masterpiece album, Faith. I love George Michael. I mean, his death affected me in ways that I can't put into words. In my opinion, he is a megastar among megastars, and is on a very short list of the greatest of all time. And the beginning of this, when I started interviewing, I wrote down, my top 10 interviews, dream interviews. And George Michael was at the very top of the list. Just an incredible songwriter, incredible singer. He was a superstar. There's nothing else that we can say about it. Having said that, here is my Wham Fiver. My top 5 recorded performances by Wham. Number 5. Last Christmas, released as a single in December of 1984 as a double A-side with Everything She Wants. Great pop song. Everything She Wants went to number 1 in the US. Anyway, Last Christmas was number 1 in Denmark and Sweden. It went to number 11 in the US and number 2 in the UK, where it was denied the top spot by Band Aid's Do They Know It's Christmas? The song created to generate donations to help starving children in Ethiopia. George Michael was on that, along with so many others. Last Christmas, George Michael's song about the sudden pain felt after running into an ex-lover has become one of the most played Christmas songs every year since its release. It's really become an international holiday standard. From 2007 through 2019, Last Christmas has recharted in the top 40 on the UK singles chart, further proof of the song's enduring popularity. Andrew and George, I guess, were watching a football game on TV at George's parents' house when George had an idea for a song, and he rushed upstairs to scribble out a chorus and create a tinkling melody on his keyboard that mimicked the sounds of Christmas time. When George played the melody and the chorus, Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day you gave it away for Andrew. He called it just a magical moment. What a great song. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart. Number 4, I'm Your Man. It was the third number 1 single for Wham in the UK. The tune also ascended to the top of the pop chart in Denmark, Ireland, and New Zealand. Went to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100, essentially released as an isolated single, though the song did make an appearance on the album The Final, or called Music from the Edge of Heaven here in the US, like I said. It was the last song that George Michael performed and recorded with Andrew Ridgeley. Wham would break up 6 months after its release in late '85. As usual, George wrote and produced the track. It's just another feel-good Wham song. Baby, I'm your man. Something interesting about I'm Your Man, it may have inspired the classic Smith song, Panic, which in turn may have inspired Brendan Urie to name his band Panic at the Disco. Now, both stories made the rounds for a while, but in recent years, both those stories have been minimized. But the original story is that Johnny Marr and Morrissey were listening to BBC Radio 1 when a news report declared the Chernobyl disaster. Immediately after that, the DJ, a guy named Steve Wright, played I'm Your Man by Wham, was right after it. Kind of a strange dichotomy of somber news followed by a peppy, happy ditty. It's said to have irked Morrissey and Marr, likely influencing Maz's lyrics such as Hang the DJ.
DJ, hang the 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 DJ.
George Michael recorded a funky version of I'm Your Man in 1996. Number 3, Wake Me Up Before You Go-Go. The song has attracted so many haters over the years who are probably too cool to admit that this song not only makes them smile from ear to ear, but it kind of makes you want to do a little jig. At worst, Wake Me Up Before You Go-Go is a guilty pleasure, but as I've grown older, I've said this before, I don't believe in guilty pleasures. You like what you like. If a song moves you, makes you want to dance, it moves you. And Wake Me Up Before You Go-Go is just such a happy ditty that it could be a cure for a pandemic. Certainly would make you look forward to when you can, kick up your heels and really enjoy life again. I've always believed that music is the best medicine, and this song is one of those joyful songs. I think that that's exactly what the song was intended to do, raise our spirits, make us want to dance. What can be wrong with that? Wake Me Up Before You Go-Go has elements really of the big band swing sound of the 30s and the 40s. Go back and listen to it again, especially with that opening jitterbug line. Combined with that energy of 50s dance rock supported by smooth rhythm and blues background vocals and a fab 80s production. Wake Me Up Before You Go-Go is one of the big Wham hits that Andrew Ridgeley was instrumental in originating. Even after Wham started to achieve massive success, Andrew's primary residence was still at his parents' place where he grew up, really because the duo was traveling so much, touring, doing different things. Didn't really make sense for him to spend money paying for his own flat that he would rarely use. Hey, frugal pop star, what a novel concept. Andrew came home one night and he left a note for his mom on his bedroom door that read, "Wake me up, up." And after that, he realized that he had duplicated the word up. He added, "Before you go-go." George was really amused by that, and it was Andrew's wake-up message that he turned that phrase into a song, and it became a worldwide smash. I'd really say it's Wham's signature song. Wake Me Up Before You Go-Go just brings back so many fond memories growing up in the 80s, especially the images and the music video where George and Andrew and their backup singers, Pepsi and Shirley, are wearing those white Choose a Life and Go-Go t-shirts and the iconic 80s imagery that has stuck with me and so many others. I mean, come on. Wake Me Up Before You Go-Go was a #1 smash in the UK, the US, Canada, Australia, most of Europe and Asia, really. Songs seem to transcend genres because its success, you think about the success on Top 40 radio, it was classified as new wave by some radio programmers and music journalists, and it peaked at number 27 on the Billboard Dance Chart in 84. My older sister had this record, and even though I was trying to be tough by listening to, Twisted Sister and Van Halen, Judas Priest, like all the cool kids, I stole her Wham record all the time. Truth be told, probably listened to it more than all 3 of those other records combined. Number 2, I Don't Want Your Freedom, I Don't Want to Play Around. Freedom, the 60s Motown throwback, is the definition of feel good. What a song. Wham's pledge for undying love and devotion, even if the relationship is sometimes one-sided, doesn't matter, just as long as we're together. Man, it's just another exceptional pop song that George Michael composed when he was only 19 years old. Freedom. It's really my favorite arrangement of a Wham song because there's so many parts to it and the musicianship is just brilliant. I mean, the rip-roar of the trumpets played by Colin Graham and Paul Spong. This wonderful pre-chorus into that mantric sing-along chorus. I mean, the bridge is fantastic with the soulful background vocals, Pepsi and Shirley again, along with George and Andrew. The piano playing by the late Tommy Iyer is really a spiritual awakening. This is such a great song. You got to go back and listen to it. And of course, the ecstasy of George Michael's lead vocal performance that makes listening to Freedom just a thrilling experience, especially the outro, where George reaches the level of his heroes, Freddie Mercury and Elton John, and may even go an inch above for a second. Freedom was the second number one knockout for Wham in the UK, staying at the top of the chart for 3 weeks in 1984. And a year later, it rose to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the fall of '85. It was also number 1 in Ireland, Norway, and Iceland. And number 1, Careless Whisper, the follow-up to Wake Me Up Before You Go from the Make It Big LP released in '84. I mean, Careless Whisper is just one of the most seductive love songs ever recorded. It shot to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and in the UK, selling over 6 million copies around the world. You think about Make It Big, that album title was a harbinger for what George Michael would do in the years following, and really Careless Whisper is where that started. On Billboard's magazine, their year-ending chart for '85, Wake Me Up Before You Go was the 3rd biggest song of the year, and Careless Whisper was the number 1 song of 1985. I mean, that's Beatles-type stuff. Although the song was credited as being co-written by Michael and Ridgeley, there was some obvious foreshadowing with the promotion of Careless Whisper. The billing of the act changed from Wham to Wham featuring George Michael. Again, I'm cheating on this one a little bit because it is a solo. It's kind of between Wham and George Michael, but Careless Whisper is so expertly crafted. Its emotional detail is a song that is truly cinema of the mind.
Silver screen and all it's sad.
George said, and I quote, "I was on my way to DJ at the Bel Air when I wrote Careless Whisper. I've always written on buses, trains, and in cars. It always happens on journeys. With Careless Whisper, I remember exactly when it first came to me where I came up with the sax line." End of quote. Speaking of the sax line, along with Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty and maybe Urgent by Foreigner, it is the most iconic sax line of the rock era. And George, ever the perfectionist, had 11 different saxophonists attempted. The 11th guy was a guy named Steve Gregory. He finally performed it to George's satisfaction. In fact, legendary producer Jerry Wexler, who did What Did I Say with Ray Charles and Respect with Aretha Franklin, among many other monumental recordings, he told a young George Michael that he should record the track at Muscle Shoals with their best players, and Wexler would produce the track. So George did exactly that, but he didn't like the recording, and he nixed those plans to return home to London, cutting live with his own band. You know, that's what I love about George Michael, his vision. He basically walked away from one of the greatest producers ever in the history of this world, a legendary studio, and the best session players from that studio to produce and record it himself. His vision. He was a pop perfectionist in search for excellence squared and thought he knew better than the greats around him. And guess what? For his music, he did know better. For example, he went through 10 different saxophonists because he remembered the first demo that the player he sang the line to had done, and it was very nuanced, especially the first part. Here's a comparison of that demo that George did at Muscle Shoals with Jerry Wexler and the version that he later cut himself. Let's see if you can hear it. The sax line was so brilliant that it has really inspired many great musicians, but by far the greatest musician
He doesn't like George Michael! He doesn't like George Michael!
From a lyrical standpoint, George wrote absolute poetry. Would make the likes of Gershwin and Porter envious. With one of the best lyrics of the decade, "I'm never gonna dance again. Guilty feet have got no rhythm." Pure genius.
Guilty feet have got no rhythm.
George's lyrics were drenched in emotional sorrow and deep regret. I mean, he drew from his own teenage experience. Andrew Ridgeley recalled in his recent book, and I quote, "The tale he crafted of a cheating lover, hemmed in by guilt, was inspired by feelings prompted by two-timing his girlfriend Helen Ty a year previously." End of quote. Turns out that while Michael was in a relationship, he got together with a girl named Jane who had previously rejected him because of his looks. And the two started going out on the sly, and the song, Careless Whisper, was George's confession. Now that he's gone, many stories have come out about George Michael's beautiful humanity and his charity. With every play, the song Careless Whisper should be a reminder to us of him. George gave Andrew Ridgeley half writing credit on Careless Whisper, even though George had written the majority of the classic at just 17. George wanted to make sure that his friend would be financially secure for life when George pursued his solo career. I mean, after all, the song has earned tens of millions in royalties over the years. George was not extremely fond of the song. I guess I've heard that many times. He was at times puzzled why people embraced the song so deeply. And the music video, I mean, it transports you right back to the 80s. In closing, with apologies to George Michael's Freedom 90, help me raise a glass to the kings of the big shot, good time bands on the run. What a kick, just two buddies living in a fantasy, or more accurately, a club fantasy. George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley, the duo that enriched us with hits galore. And they certainly lived up to their band name. The first few times I heard these royal 80s classics, they packed a pop knockout punch, wham, right in the ears. Leave us a comment about Wham. What is your Wham 5? Or tell us your memories that are connected to this band. You can get Wham's music below. Also, Andrew Ridgeley's book. It's great. You got to pick it up. Click on our Amazon links. You can do that. If you like our content, we invite you to join our community by subscribing to this channel below. Also, you can become an honorary patron to help us keep the music alive. We have some great stuff coming for you on Patreon, that more videos, more opportunities to engage about this great music. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends. Stay safe.